Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive structural shift, the mass public sector layoffs initiated by the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE for short. Using data from a really fascinating 2025 study in the International Journal of Research and Management, we're going to impartially break down the facts, the fallout, and exactly how the American workforce is reacting to these unprecedented cuts.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover the DOGE efficiency mandate, the scope of the federal layoffs, arguments for the cuts, concerns and public criticisms, a better way to restructure, and finally, preparing for economic uncertainty.
Okay, let's jump right into part one. The DOGE efficiency mandate.
So, created by executive order in January 2025, DOGE isn't your traditional government branch, not at all. It's actually a temporary initiative built for a massive technological and structural overhaul. According to the source material, its core mission is pretty straightforward. Cut waste, fraud, and abuse by modernizing federal technology and slashing bureaucratic red tape. It's an incredibly aggressive push for what supporters are calling maximized productivity.
And time is really of the essence here. Since it was created in early 2025, DOGE actually has an expiration date. It's scheduled to completely terminate after just 18 months, officially closing its doors on July 4th, 2026. This super tight window really explains the breakneck speed and sheer velocity of the policy changes and layoffs we're seeing. It was designed from the jump to be a rapid, temporary intervention, definitely not a permanent fixture.
Moving right along to part two, scope of federal layoffs.
Now these cuts, they absolutely are not isolated to just one sector. DOG's reach spans across vital infrastructure, heavily impacting major agencies like Health and Human Services, the EPA, Veterans Affairs, NOAA, the Department of Defense, and the IRS. We are literally talking about sweeping reductions that touch almost every single corner of our federal infrastructure.
When you look at the raw data, the numbers are just staggering. For example, Health and Human Services announced plans to cut 20,000 jobs. That's a mix of 10,000 layoffs and 10,000 voluntary departures. This directly hit the CDC's disease detectives and Alzheimer's researchers at the NIH. Over at the IRS, up to 7,000 probationary employees were let go right in the middle of peak tax season, which included auditors handling high-asset individuals. And the Department of Defense? They're cutting around 5,400 probationary civilian workers.
To put this into even sharper perspective, the Environmental Protection Agency is facing a potential 65% reduction in its workforce. That eliminates nearly 10,000 roles right there. Similarly, NOAA lost over 7% of its staff, which directly impacts storm predictors and hurricane forecasters. The sheer volume of these reductions is truly historic for the public sector. I mean, historically, government work has been viewed as incredibly secure, even during economic recessions.
Which brings us to part three, arguments for the cuts.
This situation has created a really sharp divide in American public opinion. It's essentially a tug of war, the push to streamline operations and save taxpayer money up against the very real fear of disrupting critical services. As we look at the responses from this study, it's important to remember that the public is sharply divided and both sides present logical arguments based on their core values about what the government's role should actually be.
Proponents of the cuts, like a graduate researcher surveyed in the study, argue that rapid reductions are the absolute best way to save taxpayer money and eliminate that notorious bureaucratic red tape. One respondent pointed out that while layoffs are, of course, never easy, a leaner government can prioritize high-performing talent and reinvest in areas that actually maximize impact. For people in this camp, the federal government had simply become way too bloated and needed a harsh but necessary pruning.
Another respondent brought up a really interesting point. They highlighted that a leaner government leaves more room for private sector innovation. They cited instances where excessive government regulation and fines were actively slowing down technological progress. From this viewpoint, government overreach is actually holding society back. So, aggressive audits and rapid downsizing by DOGE are seen as bold, totally necessary moves to unchain American innovation from those regulatory restrictions.
Now let's flip the coin for part four, concerns and public criticisms.
On the other side of the debate, critics are warning that these cuts are just moving too fast. Survey respondents argued that you simply cannot conduct thorough, data-backed audits of complex, essential functions in a matter of weeks. The big fear here is that highly valuable talent, people whose skills were developed using taxpayer money over decades, are just being tossed aside indiscriminately.
The study actually recorded 6 core anxieties regarding these mass layoffs. People are deeply concerned about a lack of transparency and fairness, a blatant disregard for deep expertise, vital services being delayed for veterans, the halting of crucial biomedical research, a massive brain drain of federal workers, and on top of all that, the potential illegality of the whole process.
And that last point is huge. The data notes that over 280,000 positions were impacted in just 3 months. The breakneck speed and method of these firings actually triggered federal legal intervention. A U.S. district judge even issued a restraining order. The judge cited that plaintiffs were likely to prove DOGE's downsizing attempts exceeded its legal authority, specifically pointing to violations of the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978, which is there to protect federal employees from arbitrary political firings.
So, is there a different path? Let's look at Part 5, a better way to restructure.
To avoid this exact kind of legal and societal fallout, human resource experts overwhelmingly recommend a much more measured approach. Step 1. Start with comprehensive, data-backed assessments to genuinely identify inefficiencies, rather than just using a sledgehammer approach. Step 2. Actually consult with stakeholders, department leaders, and the employees themselves. And Step 3. Focus heavily on retraining and redistributing employees to more meaningful roles within the government. That way, you don't lose decades of institutional knowledge overnight.
Finally, let's talk practical takeaways in Part 6, preparing for economic uncertainty.
Whether you work in the public sector or the private sector, the economic ripples of shifts this massive affect every single one of us. To successfully navigate this kind of uncertainty, the study offers a really actionable checklist. Financial experts recommend keeping 6 to 12 months of living expenses in cash. Professionally, you've got to learn new skills to make yourself indispensable, especially when it comes to automation and AI tools. Diversifying your income streams and continuously building strong professional networks are just absolutely vital safety nets when job security feels low.
Ultimately, the drive for lower costs is a reality of leadership, whether you're in government or business. But it leaves us with a really vital question to ponder. How do organizations balance necessary efficiency with social responsibility and compassion? In our race for maximum productivity, how do we make sure we aren't accidentally dismantling the very systems that keep our society functioning safely?